James Denselow is a security analyst and Middle East expert at King's College London, who joins us live now. So we heard clearly there that people on the street blame the politicians for this, but what else is behind this spate of violence in Iraq?
Well, it's an uptick, but I think we have to remember if Iraq was a human being, it would suffer from a chronic lack of stability, and there's an average of 300 people dying each month. So any time Iraq gets on the news is when there's a certain bloody day, but unfortunately they're coming around like waves of violence do, as regularly as the tide. So I think we have to remember that the Iraq of today, ever since the invasion in 2003, is deeply divided, unstable. The government is inert and at the moment suffering from a deadly deadlock. So it's a very bad time.
And what do you think is going to happen? I mean, how do they get out of the sort of bickering that they're in at the moment and resolve this?
Well, I think there's two issues here. The first issue is, of course, the elites themselves disputing the patronage of posts and the fact that you have the Prime Minister accusing the Vice President of running a death squad, which is a big problem in any coalition. And the second issue really is the lack of reconciliation that's happened in Iraqi society at a ground level. There was a horrible civil war there in 2007-2008. There hasn't really been any major effort at bringing together communities that suffered from that conflict. So I think, firstly, there needs to be political reconciliation at the elite level, and that has to translate to policy that drives people together rather than continue to apart.
I mean, at the moment also people sort of say, well, it's only 2 weeks since the Americans left. Did that actually make any difference? I mean, was the violence a bit more under control when they were there?
No, I think there was huge bombings in the end of August, there was bombings in December, there's bombings now. I remember speaking to an American general in Baghdad who was saying that the frequency of attacks has reduced, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the size of the people killed is going down. I mean, there's 650,000 Iraqi security forces, yet they're not able to prevent simultaneous attacks across the country. Vulnerable people in markets, pilgrims, police forces, all are being targeted.
And what about the suggestion that it could be outside forces, that Syria, Iran might be sort of fomenting this from behind the scenes? What do you make of that?
I don't quite buy that, especially when I hear members of Hezbollah sort of blaming the Americans for these bombings. I think Iraq is a country that suffers from enough of its own problems to really start fighting the battles of others. And if you look at their national politics, their relations with Syria are fairly good, and of course Iran is a hugely important player there. So I feel that this is more of a chronic domestic issue.
So how, and given that it is a chronic domestic issue, what do they need to do to sort of reduce the violence? I mean, are there any practical measures they can take?
Well, I think the most immediate thing that strikes me is the incorporation of the Sons of Iraq. They're a largely Sunni militia that were brought on board as part of the surge. They were offered jobs within the government. There's some 100,000 of them. They're weapons trained. And the Shia-led government has not incorporated them into the system. So they feel as if they're left out, humiliated, not being paid. And these guys have every reason to attack the state rather than work with it. So that's a very easy way of addressing this current lack of security.
And is it politically palatable?
Well, it's difficult. It's difficult for a leader who's representing the Shia community of Iraq. They need to be statesmen who represent all of Iraq, and that, of course, is the key problem here, which is why one of the relatives of the victims of today said it's the government's fault, because they're not representing everyone, they're representing their own constituents.
Okay, thank you very much, James Denselow. Thank you for your expertise.